My name is Jean Sylvester. I'm one of the librarians here. I organize the programs. I would like to acknowledge our mayor, Dr. Joseph Scarpelli, coming to this great event, and our library board president, Mr. Anthony Iannarone. Also have coffee and cookies on the side, so please feel free at any time to go up and get some and bring it back. Did I mention asking you to make sure your cell phones are turned off or set to vibrate? Okay. Now, who was here a month ago when we showed that film, Nutley 1918? And wasn't it a great program? It's great to see so many people here again tonight that love Nutley and love Nutley's history. So we've had John Demmer, town historian, here before. We've also had David Wilson here before. He had a book signing here for his book, Fire in Our Lives, and he has copies on the table, and you can talk to him about his book and experiences as a Nutley fire safety inspector. And I'm sure they will be here again. And we're going to be filming this presentation, so just please keep that in mind. We're going to be filming. We want to move the program along, so please keep your questions for the end of the program. And let's get started. Thank you.
All right. All aboard the trolley.
Good evening, everyone. That was a trick, by the way, anyway. Trolleys have bells, trains have whistles. You all lose 5 points for that. There's going to be a quiz at the end. My name is John Demmer. I'm town historian for Nutley. As Jeannie mentioned, this is like my 5th or 6th presentation here at the library. I want to acknowledge that and thank the library for doing this, and it's been really terrific. You guys have been very supportive of these events, and I'm so happy to see you here again. Large turnout for this. This is the first time that I'm doing one in conjunction with someone else, and who better than Dave Wilson. We seem to really hit it off, and I think we have a good presentation for you tonight. Briefly about myself, I came to Nutley about 30 years ago, got very interested in history, started collecting memorabilia, postcards, and then I was at a postcard show, and someone said, you want to do a book on the town? And I said, oh, I don't know if I can, but ended up doing it, and as a result of that, was made town historian. And the only reason I really mentioned that is when it came time to pick a cover for the book, they said, you know, pick something that's nostalgic, but not vague. And I thought, wow, this picture here of 2 trolley men in front of a Nutley trolley. And it's just interesting how things come around. That was many years ago, and here we are tonight going to speak about this very, very interesting feature that ran through the town. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime here, Dave Wilson.
Okay, thanks, John. It's really been fun working with John. If anybody's ever worked with him in the past and been to his programs, we know that those are great programs that get a lot of research. John goes to a lot of flea markets and finds different memorabilia all around the area, and then he takes it and goes through it. So I was fortunate enough to have some access to his files, and he had a lot of pictures. I had some pictures, he had stories, I had stories, so we merged everything like the one big conglomerate of trolley history and stories. So we're hoping now that a lot of these stories will be new to you. I'm trying to figure out where to stand so this doesn't feedback here. This isn't on. No, it's not that. Okay. So it's just because of where the speakers are. Maybe I'll stand over here and see how that works. You didn't get it.
Try it back.
Okay. Back up this way. Still not working. Okay. All right. This is better here. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is just going into the Nutley Trolley story and how it affected Nutley, the building of it, and all that we can, that was done back in those days prior to our present commission government. We were talking about Franklin, New Jersey back then when all the trolleys started. If we look at our first slide up there, we can see we're going to be going back, pretty far back to the early 1890s. in 1880s, Tesla and Edison and all were trying to come out with ways to get people around to use their electric inventions that coming out, how they could take that electric and use it in a vehicle to move people en masse. We had trains back then. We had steam trains, and we know the problem with those, that they were expensive to build, the lines were expensive, the bridges were expensive. We needed stations, they were dirty, they were stinky, the boilers blew up, and they only went to certain places, the trains. They didn't take you into the downtown. Now, at the time, we didn't have downtowns. So the trolleys, they were a way to help promote the town's growth, because now we could get people into town on the main line, which we had here in Nutley on High Street, or let people off there, and then we could put them onto trolleys that would take them further into the town. Another advantage of having the trolleys back then is when they started, there was a lot of the jobs in the factories and industry were out of town. They were in Newark, they were in Patterson, and we needed to find a way for our people to get from town to those areas, just like we're still trying to do today. We're still trying to find what's the best way we can get to jobs that aren't necessarily in town, they're in neighboring towns or cities, because there was big industry going back then. Patterson had the mills, Newark had all the shipping, and a lot of things that they were building down there. So it was a good time to try and expand our transportation, because remember back then we only had horses and bicycles, or you walked. There was really not much else. We had a stagecoach line that came very close to Nutley, down through Belleville and parts of Newark, but it didn't really come into here. So unless you worked on your farm in town, or you worked at a local small store, or helped someone out, it was a long battle to get to work. And back then we worked 6-7 days a week, so the commute was pretty onerous for people. So the trolleys really helped develop the towns. So if we look at some of the other history we're going to be doing, we're going to also be covering all the tracks that were laid in town. We're going to take you to a picture show, and we put all the pictures in order with old pictures that we have, that we found, historical pictures, and we overlaid them with some new pictures so we can help to orient some of you that may not be familiar with Nutley, to help you understand what section of town we're talking about, because it did look different 100 years ago, 120 years ago. Things were definitely different, trees were different, buildings were different. So we're going to make that better. And we'll look at some of the big names that we were talking about. When they first started to build the trolley system, it was started up in Patterson and Passaic. They were coming that way, and they were coming that way out of Newark, and they were trying to make everything meet in the middle. And Nutley was in the middle. And that was one of the big stumbling blocks, I guess, back then. Even Nutley, or Franklin as we knew it back then, they were very demanding. The people that lived here were very smart. We had a lot of people who worked over in the city, people with money that lived here, in addition to the farmers that were protecting their properties. So it was a battle to get the trolley line from the Nutley-Clifton border to the Belleville border. We were like the missing link in between. And John and I are going to explain a little bit by bit how it became difficult for everybody to try and build these lines there. And then we're going to look at some of the different companies that were involved there. Consolidated Traction was the next company that bought out. And back in the beginning, when trolleys first started, it was a very fractured setup. There was people, investors, and other people, engineers that were involved, but each of them had their own little trolley idea and where they were building, and their money only went so far to create the tracks. So they had to take all these little trains or trolleys and try to connect them somehow. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. So they kept buying each other out, and they became they kept consolidating. And then finally, because there were so many problems with safety and with other issues and maintenance and capital monies being available, the Attorney General at the time was, he was a fellow that was quite powerful. He worked at the down in New Jersey as the Attorney General, and he was looking at all the different things that were going on with the trolley systems in town and how they were having accidents and people were not happy with stuff. And so he ended up coming up like, you know what, I think I'm going to leave public service, his own public service being with the state, and go and create the Public Service Corporation. And his brother was a banker, and the two of them were able to start the Public Service Corporation, which then became a monopoly, and we know all about monopolies and how big and powerful they became back in those years. And they were able to start making a monopoly so that they could get everybody to use the electric that they were making. It's the same public service company that we think about today when we think of PSE&G. It was public service. They were doing gas, electric, and transportation back in those days. They wanted to corner the market. And they wanted to make sure that everything was run on electric. So let's see. So the next thing we have is the, John found this one. Where'd you find this, John?
Ephemera show.
Okay, so this, back then even, they were starting to do things with the promotion of the trolley in Nutley as a real estate investment, because it made values better, that you could live in a house in Nutley and still get to a job somewhere out of the area. So this was really big. So this was an ad there. We didn't have that type of trolley car, but we did have quite a few trolleys running at one time. We're going to be showing you all the different trolley cars. You'll get to see throughout the show the different ones we had. And then just to link John and I, that's a museum that I was at up in Maine, and they have a trolley car up there. So that's similar to the streetcars or trolley cars that we have that were running through Nutley back then. So one of the first finds that John had was his maps, and this was really worked out well. So John, I think you're going to talk right now just about the creation.
So the trolley line through Nutley, and that's what I'll be handling mostly, is how the trolley line affected Nutley. Like Dave mentioned, we had this connection issue. So we needed to connect through Nutley so we could get over to Belleville from Passaic area. So the original plan, the simple plan, was to come in and to come through Nutley on Passaic Avenue. Now, that would have worked great, except that there was a lot of resistance to that. And there was one major force that said, listen, I do not want this trolley line coming down, and it was influential enough to change that. And with that one change, with not coming down Passaic Avenue, three major things happened in Nutley. And I'm going to cover them all as we hit them and explain to you what I think the three biggest things that happened because of the trolley being rerouted and how it affected Nutley. So instead of coming down Passaic Avenue and then to Center and down, now the trolley had to find a new way in. So the next best way they could come out of Clifton or Aquaquinock was to come in from Main Street onto Franklin Avenue. And that's where we're going to start our journey, is the trolley coming into Nutley in the Franklin Avenue area.
Okay, this should be a familiar screen to a few of you. This is Passaic Avenue near Glendale. The building in the back is where the New Man Hing restaurant is, and the La Piazza restaurant. And then above it here, that's Kingsland Street. So Kingsland Street's here, and we're coming this way going north on Passaic Avenue. So we have two trolley cars there. It was the 13. The broadline trolleys were what was developed in this area for Nutley, and the broadline trolleys were a very, very successful line that was a big moneymaker, real big moneymaker. So they were able to find investors all the time to constantly pump money into it. So the broadline trolleys, they stopped at this point. This is the stopping point where they would turn around and then come back into Nutley and go back to Belleville. So what would happen at this point, there was a small station there way back, probably down where the pool store is now in that area, and you would change trolleys there and get on this 74 or another line and go on to Passaic and Patterson. If you had to go to that way, or if you were coming that way, you would get on to the 13 down here at Glendale Street and then move on down through Nutley and then down into Belleville to the Big Tree Garage. So the trolleys were running very often. Here they're stacked up actually because they got a little ahead of schedule, but we had 6-minute headway between each trolley, so they were running pretty consistently through the town. So you didn't have to wait long for a trolley to come in the heyday of when the trolleys were here. So we're going to see different trolleys. These are some of the later model trolleys. This is probably the mid-30s, just right around when the trolley time ended. And then this is making the loop into Glendale Street. So we can see some of the buildings behind there, aren't there yet, but this building's still here. In fact, just for rent. And that's where Nick's Barbershop is. Nick's Barbershop is there now. And then we'd come on this way, and this would go up Glendale Street and you would head up towards Franklin Avenue and then go south on Franklin Avenue. So that was the famous Glendale Loop. And even in the building over here, there was a Glendale luncheonette was in there, a Loop luncheonette that Joe, and Fannie and Mary's luncheonette was there. There's a number of little stores that were there through the years. So just to show you again, this is Passaic and Kingsland. We're looking now north where that would go. And this was a problem turn. Now remember with trolleys, the big thing with them, they like to go straight. They didn't steer. You couldn't steer a trolley, it had to follow the tracks. So the more times they could make the trolley go straight, the better it was for the trolleys, for noise, for the neighbors, because when they made turns, there was a lot of screeching and it was very loud. And in fact, this particular curve here, the town actually flagged the engineers after they built it and said, no, you built it wrong. We want you to rebuild it and put a different kind of bend in that curve so that trolleys won't screech as much. Now remember, all those buildings weren't there back then. We're going to show you the next couple of pictures how different that area was. Okay, so this is Kingsland Street looking north. This is the new apartment, or west rather. This is the new apartment building where they tore the gas station down at Passaic and Kingsland. So we're looking north here now, a little narrow street, still narrow through there. And this is how it used to look. Okay, these two houses are still here. This is a great set of slides that John found recently, glass negatives actually. And these two houses are here. This is a farm. And right around in here was where Elm Place would come out. This house here is gone now. So if we look, there's really not even a street there yet. There's just a cow path. So when the developers wanted to come in and put the trolley in, the farmers didn't want it there because they don't want to give up the land. They had livestock there. They don't want the noise. The homeowners really didn't have any front yard to give up here. So they were only able to put a single track through there and a very narrow roadway. And today we're still paying for that decision because that road is still narrow through there. There's no way to make it any wider because the houses have all been built there now. So it was definitely something that the homeowners there were very powerful, just like they were on Passaic Avenue when they got it rerouted. They were able to also get it so only half as many cars would go down Kingsland because there's only one track, so only one way. And that's just Glendale Street coming up the hill towards Franklin Avenue. And then Franklin Avenue going south towards Kingsland Street. This is John's favorite part.
Okay, we talked about three things that had to happen. We're not coming down Passaic Avenue anymore. If we had, we'd come to Passaic, go to Center, go down to Washington, make our turn. We never have to cross a railroad track. Now we're coming down Franklin. We have a problem. The trains had been coming through Nutley since the late 1860s, so they were very well established. This particular area, which is right near Ralph's, if you're familiar with it, High Street, Franklin Avenue, that train used to run on grade. Just the way, if you know by East Center Street and Washington Avenue, how the tracks are at grade level? These tracks were at grade level. Now the trolley faction wants to come through. They've already had problems with the trains hitting carts and wagons and people. Now you're going to run a trolley on, endless amount of trolleys during the day. Could be a nightmare. So this went actually to a court who came up with a very, very unique decision, which explains so much about this crazy bridge. You see how it says 12.4 there? And constantly, every year, someone challenges that theory with a 14-foot vehicle. 14 does not go into 12 as a whole, as we know. So the reason this bridge is so low is that the decision from the court, I think it was 1896, said, okay, train company, you raise your tracks 7 feet. Trolley company, you dig down Franklin Avenue 7 feet. That's the thing. So, and the reason you don't have 14 feet is because the 7 feet, they only had to raise their track 7 feet. So the top of the tracks, by the time you put the track, the lumber and the framing for the bridge, that's why you have such a low area there. But that was a very unique solution and one of the first major things that had to happen in order to get that trolley to come through Nutley. one of my favorite stories listening to, have you all heard of Harry Chenoweth? Former mayor, just an absolute wonderful guy. And I had so many occasions to sit with him, thank God, before he passed away. And you know, when you sit with someone older, then sometimes they'll tell you the same story over. I didn't care. One of his favorite stories was, because he was actively saw the trolleys running, was that when the trolley came through, you know, you have the catenary, which is the electric lines, and you have the pole. He said so many times when the trolley came through and went under that bridge, the pole bent down so low that when it came out, if the trolley conductor came out too fast, the pole would pop off the line. So what was the solution to that? He said the trolley engineer always carried a wood stick with him, and he would come out and he'd have to fish that pole and get that back onto the line. I have no idea what he did in the rain. If I was a trolley conductor in the rain, you'd be walking home at that point, because I'm not touching that line up there. But I remember he would just say it, and you could see in his eyes he was reliving that moment. He remembered how that would happen. So if we go to the next slide. This is an actual train, a very, very early image in Nutley. I know it's a little grainy, but I appreciate that it was taken even. So Rouse would be over to the right. This is a steam train crossing over. And that bridge has not changed 1 ounce since this picture was taken. You can go there, it's the same exact bridge, but this is probably shortly after it was raised. And the lines could go under now, and now you have no conflict between trolley and train. Okay. Yes, and that is St. Paul's back there that you can see back there on the left. I know it's a grainy image, but you know, we have to give them credit for taking it. This is that view today. This is a very popular area for Nutley, or an interesting area for me, because that's the Lambert Square area. You can see the old Masonic Hall building there. When the trolleys were first running, that Masonic Hall building was only 2 stories tall, but then there was a fire in 1911, which made them add the 3rd story. But you can see that bridge is very, very low. Next one. Now that explains this photo. This came from that same glass plate negative collection. It's the N.F. Carroll collection. 110 glass plate negatives. I've had them for 20 years. The previous guy had them for 20. Just got them developed this year with some help. So this is an image near Passaic Avenue, way over here, and you can see that the old structure there, that's the level that the train used to run at. And this was their solution for raising those tracks. So I get the feeling that this is also very close to that time after that court case came through. Is there another one on that also? And this is from a different view. It's just a wonderful picture. We're still, a bunch of us are all trying to find out. It seems like a very odd configuration up here with that X bracing, and why they left that part high there, why they didn't just run through this particular steel structure. I don't know if there's any engineers in the room, if there's any sense to this, if they were planning to put something else under it. I really don't know. But once again, you can see the level that the train used to run at. And this is a postcard. This is one of the first postcards ever collected of Nutley. And again, you can see new stands there, and you can see the short ones. At one point too, when they did raise the tracks, they also had prepared for a second set. That's why it's so wide. It never occurred, but they had prepared to have a second set of tracks coming, because the train was very popular for Nutley. One of the main reasons we grew so fast. And here is just a random trolley car photo. It was in the Newark Library collection. The car is actually in motion. Again, it's a horrible picture, but it is accredited to Nutley. We're figuring late, early 1890s to mid 1890s, possibly. I can't really tell from the car type whether it is, but that's one of the earliest trolley photos in Nutley that we have today. And this is just another wonderful shot. This is after the double set of tracks went in. Now this is also important to talk about. This is sort of the second thing we have to talk about, the second major change. So now we have to do this, we have to raise these tracks, we got to get these trolley cars under. But remember, prior to the trolley coming through and the decision to put it on Franklin Avenue was a residential street. Houses on it, houses everywhere, just like Passaic Avenue. So what the trolley really did was it transformed the town now. Because if you're going to take the trolley through town, and you're a businessman, you're going to say, well, wait, I want my business in the area where the trolley's going. This way people who don't live in town, who are coming through, they can get off and check, go to my business. Again, this has to be after 1911, and we have the double tracks in, and the Masonic Hall has its 3rd floor on it. You can see the Atlantic Pacific Tea Company over here on the right. This corner store right there is Murad. It's sort of like a pharmacy. It became Crammons after that. A lot of the postcards I have all have the Crammons name on it. And what's in that building now? Is that the Chinese, or is that the chicken place now? Yes, right there. That building, that's a Lambert building. So Lambert had a lot of involvement with this area of town. I could do a whole show on Lambert, so I won't talk much about him, but he had involvement with the Masonic Hall, redesigning that. He built that building there, but the main thing to remember here, point number 2, Franklin Avenue now widens, and Franklin Avenue now becomes the center of town. Okay. Yeah, this is, if you know Nutley Liquors, Mike owns that. You can see the tracks. You can see the tracks in there. This is just a wonderful photo. I know those gas tanks near the sidewalk created some havoc recently. No one's really expecting to find anything under there, but they did. But this is the central garage, again, right near this whole High Street, Franklin Avenue area, now changing from residential to business.